So today we're going to start human reproduction, and before we get into the lesson proper, we'll give you this as an introduction.
Dear Tim and Moby, where do babies really come from? I'm confused. Drew. Well, thanks a lot, Moby. Alright, I guess we'll start with eggs. All humans begin life as a single fertilized egg. Women have egg cells in their ovaries. Ovaries are a part of the female reproductive system. These eggs are released about once a month when a woman has her period. Sperm cells are released from the penis during sexual intercourse. The penis and testicles are the male reproductive organs. A woman gets pregnant when one of her egg cells is fertilized by a male sperm cell. That means that the egg cell and sperm cell have joined together to make a whole new kind of cell. What happens next is kind of strange. The fertilized cell divides into 2 cells, then 4 cells, and 8 cells, and so on. It becomes a little cluster. This cluster travels through the woman's reproductive system. It passes through the fallopian tubes into a chamber called the uterus. The cluster of cells plants itself in the lining of the uterus. The outer layer of cells forms a covering called the placenta, and the inner layer becomes the embryo. This is where the waiting starts. After 8 weeks, the embryo begins to grow organs. Now it's called a fetus. Somewhere around 3 months of pregnancy, the fetus will be big enough that a mother's tummy starts to stick out. But it takes about 9 months of growth for that fetus to be ready to leave the mother's body. During these 9 months, the fetus floats around in a protective housing called the amniotic sac and lives off of nutrients from the mother's body. The umbilical cord connects the fetus to the placenta that we talked about earlier. Nutrients travel from the mother to the fetus through this cord. When the baby is finally born, a doctor or nurse will cut the umbilical cord so that the baby can live on its own. Your belly button is what's left of your umbilical cord. What are you talking about? Robots can't give birth. Oh, Cassie and Rita have been getting lots of questions about pregnancy. They asked me to mention that you can't generally get pregnant without having sexual intercourse. There's no chance of becoming pregnant from a swimming pool or by kissing or whatever. Huh? Is that a baby? Oh, cute.
Okay, so that was our brief introduction. Today we're going to look at boy bits and girl bits essentially. We have a double lesson timetable. This won't take the time of the double. So you are going to be writing up your notes, and then I have some activities for you. Now in the assignment that's pinged, there is a page that has diagrams already drawn of boy bits and girl bits. If you can print them, brilliant. If not, you are going to have to draw them in. So apologies for that. So our learning intention for this little short section is to understand the parts and the jobs of the male reproductive system. So you pause this as you need to and then move on. So if there's 2 types of reproduction that can be done, sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Plants can do both, but humans or animals can only do sexual reproduction. So that should give you a hint as to how many parents are required for sexual reproduction. Okay, so it involves 2 parents, male and a female cells, and what they are going to contribute are what are called sex cells. The science word for them, they are called gametes. So there's a male gamete and there's a female gamete. So hopefully now, if I was to ask you what the female gamete is, you're going to shout something at the screen, and if we ask you what the male gamete is, you're shouting something else. And I'm really proud because you're shouting that the female gamete is your egg and your male gamete is a sperm. Now the size is actually important, so I've made the egg here really big, and the sperm I made as small as I could. But in reality, human eggs are one of the largest cells in the human body in females, and a male gamete is one of the smallest. So you need to know how many parents are involved, you need to know what the examples of gametes are, and you need to understand what fertilization is. Now we will do fertilization again. So fertilization is when the baby gets made, and it is described as the fusion, so that's just a posh way of saying joining, of male and female gametes to produce a zygote. And this is that one cell that we showed you in the cartoon. Okay, so that is just our introduction to it. So we are now going to look at the male parts for your reproductive system. Now, while we go through the reproductive system, you have to have a think about what might you think the two jobs of the male parts are. So this is front view of male reproductive bits, and we're going to go through the parts that are labelled numerically. So 1 down here, I'm hoping you're saying that it is what's called testicle. So number 2 is up here on the left, and number 2 is the sperm duct. So the sperm is going to get made in your testicle, and it's going to travel up sperm ducts. You have 2 testicles, so 2 different sperm ducts, and when it goes in here, it joins part of your urinary system eventually, but we have these things up here that it has to go through. So this, we'll get to 8 in a second. So this little thing, it kind of looks like leaves. This is called a seminal vesicle, and below that is a prostate. So you may know somebody that has had prostate cancer or have heard of prostate cancer. So this is something that affects men in their late 50s onwards. They have issues with weeing, and that's kind of the sign that says your prostate has gotten enlarged and you need to really go and get it checked out, because it can be very dangerous. So after that, our sperm has travelled up our sperm duct. It's gone through past the seminal vesicle and the prostate. So these things supply liquid into your sperm to help them on their way. And at this point, we have joined what's called your excretory system. So this is your urethra. So usually when men urinate, it's out through the urethra, because this is our bladder up here, number 8. We'll get to it in a second. But the urethra is also the way that semen leaves the male body. So number 6 is the penis. Number 7 is the sac in which the testicles sit, and there's a really important reason why they are not within the body, why they sit out in this sac, and we'll get to that later. So number 8 is your bladder, and number 9 is your urethra. So this is coming from your kidneys, both sides. So the male reproductive system, while it is standalone, it is also joined to your urinary system, and it does 2 jobs. But in terms of the male reproductive system and what are its 2 jobs, so you may have some ideas. So first job is it has to produce the sperm, so the male gametes, and the second job is that it has to deliver the sperm to the female. So you have your diagram already hopefully printed out, so you just need to label that up for yourself, and you need to have what the jobs of the male reproductive system are. So that's the overall jobs, but we're now just going to have a little look at individual jobs. So the testes down here, its big thing is that it makes sperm, and the other thing that it does is it makes testosterone. So the joy of puberty now, testosterone production is increasing, and that's responsible for sperm production and also for becoming and looking like a man. The next thing down here is the scrotum. So we said this is the kind of sacs that the testes are in, and the reason why this is outside your body is that it keeps it at a lower temperature, slightly lower temperature. So it's about 35, 34 degrees, and that temperature is necessary to make sperm. So you can find in some males that if they have poor sperm production, they actually recommend that you wear boxer shorts and not briefs, and that in movies they used to make jokes of it, but literally putting an ice pack on your boy bits, and that would hopefully cool them down and help you with sperm production. So this is supposed to be a sperm duct. Apologies for not being highlighted. And its job is that it's going to carry the sperm from the testes to the urethra and out. So the next is the seminal vesicle, and your prostate has a similar job. So the prostate should be here, so I apologize for that. So what this does is the sperm are coming up here, and when they get to your prostate and your seminal vesicle, they actually add fluid to it, and they actually add amino acids and sugars and food for the sperm, or an energy source for the sperm, because they have a pretty long journey for a really, really small cell. So that is their job. And the last one then, I think, is the penis, and its job is it has to get sperm into the female body, and usually it has to be erect to do that. So you have your diagram, you've labelled it up, and this now is just the summary bits of what the different parts do. So your testes produce your sperm and your testosterone. Your sperm duct will carry your sperm from your testes to your urethra and out. The seminal vesicles and the prostate produce semen, and it nourishes the sperm and helps them to swim. The penis is responsible for placing sperm inside the body of a female, and the point of the scrotum is to keep the testes at a slightly lower temperature so that sperm can be made. So that's the first part to our lesson. So you can finish writing up your notes, pause, go for a break, run around, do whatever, and come back for the next bit. So this is the next bit. So our learning intention for this section is to understand the parts and jobs of the female reproductive system. So in a lot of ways, the female reproductive system is simpler because it is a standalone system. It doesn't join to the urinary tract. So if you make a fist for your hand, this part here, number 3, is about the size of your fist when it's not being used. So we'll go through the labels. So 1 here is your ovary. And these are just ligaments that hold the ovary in place. Number 2 is a thing called your fallopian tube. So ovary is where eggs get made and they get released, and then they're going to travel down your fallopian tube. They also we'll see later, they get fertilized. So if an egg is going to meet sperm, it's going to happen in your fallopian tube. So, I don't know why that's disappeared. There's 2 3s and it's not the one we want. So here, number 3 here is what's called your uterus, and some people would call it a womb, or you may see that in some books. So if the egg is fertilized, it gets to the uterus and it's going to implant there, and then the baby starts, or the cells start to grow to make a baby. If it's unfertilized, it literally will just keep on going for the exit, which is this way. So number 4 is called the cervix, and that is the mouth of, or the opening to the uterus. If you are pregnant, this essentially plugs up so the baby can grow in there nice and happily until 9 months have passed. So you should, once you hit kind of early 20s, you have to go and get what's called a smear, or you should go and get a smear of your cervix, because these cells can change rapidly and can end up with cervical cancer. Some of you may have had the HPV vaccine, and that is again to prevent cervical cancer. And then number 5 is the vagina. So it's essentially the exit for the baby, and it's the entry point for your sperm. So you have your diagram now that you can label up for yourself. Just one last point, this red that's here, so this red that's here is called your endometrium, and depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, this will be very thick because it's going to be lined with lots of blood, or you will be shedding the blood if you're having your period. Okay, so just to talk about what are the jobs of just the different bits. So the ovary, its main job is to produce eggs, and it also produces 2 hormones, so estrogen and progesterone, which at puberty you start to produce more of. They help with the release of eggs, and they help in the maintenance of pregnancy. And the next thing that we're going to look at is the fallopian tube. So this is going to carry the egg from the ovary to the uterus, and if an egg meets a sperm, it's going to fertilize it somewhere along your fallopian tube. So your uterus is the place where, if the egg is fertilized, the baby starts to develop and can get its food supply. The cervix, we said, is just the entrance to the uterus, and the vagina is the exit for the baby when it's being born, and is also responsible for holding the penis during sexual intercourse. So, as we all know, women are much more complicated in a very good way compared to the males. So we have 3 jobs. Our female reproductive system has 3 jobs. So can you think what they might be? So the first job is we have to produce the eggs, so the female gametes. The second job is we have to hold and nourish the baby when pregnant. And the third job is we have to be able to give birth to the baby. So make sure you have these 3 jobs, and in our last one we're going to summarize in the table for you. So the ovary produces the egg and produces the female hormones. The fallopian tube catches the egg and transports it to the uterus, and it's going to be the site of fertilization if that's on the cards. Your uterus is the site of implantation. It holds your developing embryo. So it holds and nourishes the embryo. Will be enough. You don't need to put in this part if you don't want to. And it forms the placenta. So that's going to nourish your embryo and also remove waste products. And the vagina is where sperm enters and where the baby exits. So you need to now make sure this pretty much covers rag numbers 1 to 9 in terms of the notes. The homework is on the team's assignment. So if memory serves, you need to go into Quizlet to do 2 cards sets, and in class notebook there is a homework page which has 3 questions, so you need to make sure they get done. And you need to, there is no link for this, you need to go into your class notebook, you need to find your class notes section of your part of it, and there is a page in there for the photos of your lesson notes. So this is not an assignment, whereas this is an assignment. If you have any problems, I'm still on the Zoom for the duration of the lesson, so get in touch. Talk soon.